What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be going over the most overrated player from every NFL team. So it's time to ruffle some feathers. It's definitely time to upset some people because most fans of most teams think all their players are great. They hold most of their players in high regard, higher than they should be held. So it's time to pull those guys down a little bit, knock them down a peg or two, and let them know, hey, might be a solid player, but he's not as good as you think he is. If you're new to the channel, definitely make sure to subscribe, hit the like button on the video as it does help out the video and the channel. So let's start with the NFC East, and let's start with the Cowboys, America's team, one of the biggest fan bases, one of the most passionate fan bases in the country. Let's get these guys upset first, and I know I'm going to make them upset with this pick, and I'll be honest, this one is actually a little bit harder because I think a lot of players on the Cowboys are great, and I think a lot of them are fairly rated, but the one guy that just sticks out to me as being the one that's just hyped up a little too much is Dak Prescott. Now, Dak Prescott is starting this year on fire. He's playing great. He's doing what he's supposed to do, not making very many mistakes, still making some, but he's playing at a way higher level than we've seen so far in his career, which is great. But even going back to last year when, you know, he wasn't playing nearly this good, people were still talking about this guy like he could be a top 5 to 7 QB, putting him over names like Aaron Rodgers, and you might think, man, that's like crazy, like who the heck is actually saying that? No, a lot of people, mainly Cowboy fans, are saying these things, giving him the benefit of the doubt when he had bad games because, you know, it's America's team, the team is good, Dak Prescott's going to get it together. Look, I think Dak Prescott's actually playing really great this year, but he's not nearly as good or as hyped, or should be as hyped, as a lot of Cowboy fans have him. So that's my pick for the Cowboys. Moving on to the Eagles, definitely has to be Jordan Howard. When he came in this offseason, Eagles fans were rejoicing, saying they finally had their running back, a guy that could get the solid yards. They had the receivers. They have Zach Ertz. They got a good quarterback. They just needed a solid running back. And a lot of people were like, hold on, pump the brakes on Jordan Howard. I know his stats look good in Chicago, but he's not that good of a running back. There's a reason they parted ways with him and didn't even care. Like, they felt fine with it, even though he's had, you know, good rushing, you know, yardage numbers. He's not that good of a running back. Doesn't do much in terms of yards, you know, after contact, not good in the receiving game, just a replacement level running back, and honestly, not even the best running back on the Eagles. I believe once they really start giving Miles Sanders more work, they're going to quickly see that he's the best running back on that team, but there's still a lot of Eagles fans that are hopeful that Jordan Howard is really the missing link to that offense, and he's just not going to be. For the Giants, this is a very easy one. It's definitely Alec Ogletree. A lot of people talk about this guy like he's one of the best coverage linebackers in the league. They say, oh, well, he's got, you know, interceptions. Interceptions, just like for defensive backs, are not a great stat. It does not tell the whole story. Alec Ogletree is one of the worst cover linebackers in the league. All you got to do is watch him play, if you're honest with yourself. He gives up a lot of catches for a lot of yards relative to the targets, you know, the amount of times he's targeted. And he misses a good amount of tackles, too. There's a reason the Rams got rid of him, you know, not too long after re-signing him. Just not that good of a player. Definitely had the potential to be, but it's just very clear that he's not that guy anymore. But he's still talked about as if he's, you know, one of the better linebackers in the league, and he's certainly not that. And last in this division, the Redskins, definitely Josh Norman is the most overrated player on the team. Still an okay player, but not nearly what he was when he was with the Panthers, especially the 1 year where he was just out of his mind good. He's been regressing ever since, but a lot of people would still say that he's a top 10 cornerback, and he's certainly not that. He gets beat a lot. You know, he's even been benched in some occasions because he was getting beat so much. He gives up a good amount of touchdowns. You know, still an okay player, but he's just not, he's not that shutdown corner that some people still regard him as. Now let's go to the NFC North. We'll start with the Vikings, and we're going to stick with cornerbacks here. Xavier Rhodes is the most overrated player in the Vikings. Now, again, this is a good player. Just because you're a good player doesn't mean you can't be overrated. Because Xavier Rhodes, is he a top 10 cornerback? Probably. It's close. It's definitely debatable. I wouldn't say you were wrong if you said he was top 10. But just a year ago, you know, some people were going as far as to say this guy was top 3 at his position. And he was never that good. He was never top 3. You know, even in his best year, maybe in his best year, you could have said he was getting close to top 5. But like I said, people were calling this guy top 3. You know, putting him over guys like Patrick Peterson, Stephon Gilmore. He's just not that good. He's still a very good player, but he's not nearly as good as a lot of Vikings fans think he is. And honestly, I'm even starting to see some Vikings fans come around a little bit more to the idea that he's actually not as good as they once thought he was. For the Lions, I have to go with Marvin Jones here, and this is another example of this is a solid player. Marvin Jones is a good player. But a lot of people still consider him the best receiver on the team, and that's why I have to say he's the most overrated player on that team, because Kenny Golladay is very clearly the best receiver on that team, but for some reason, Kenny Golladay, for being the best receiver on his team, seems like he's the most under the radar receiver in the league. Even on Madden, Marvin Jones is rated higher than Kenny Golladay. And Kenny Golladay, like I said, is very clearly the best receiver on the team. Marvin Jones is a solid player, but he's not the best on the team. But it seems like that's kind of the sentiment, is that he is. And not really sure why that's the case, but that's why I have him as the most overrated player on the Lions. For the Packers, there was a couple guys to go with here. You could go with Jimmy Graham, but I don't think Jimmy Graham is as overrated as he used to be, because I think people have finally realized that he's just not the guy that he used to be. So I'm not going to go with Jimmy Graham. Instead, I'm going to go with Blake Martinez, because there's a lot of people that think this guy is one of the best linebackers in the league, and he's just certainly not. And I don't know how people think this. I think they just look at the tackle numbers, kind of similar to like other defensive players when they look at interceptions. With linebackers, a lot of times people just look at tackles and they say, like, that's it, that's the metric, and it's just not. You can get a lot of tackles and still not be a very good player. And Blake Martinez, I think he's an okay player, but there's some people that think he's one of the best linebackers in the league, and he's not. Just watch him play. I mean, it's very clear to see that he's not. He's not at all close to being one of the best linebackers in the league. For the Bears, this is another easy one for me. It's Mitchell Trubisky. Mainly because Bear fans, really still, are holding out hope, and they jump on everybody's back anytime they say something bad about Trubisky, and they say, man, he's about to break out, he's about to be the next star, and he's just done nothing to suggest that he's going to be that. Just quite simply, he has not done anything to suggest that yet. Sure, I hope he does turn into that guy. I don't ever want to wish failure on anybody, but if we've watched him play, he just hasn't been that good. And he's the thing that's holding the team back more than anything else right now. And, that's not to say that he can't turn it around, but for the state right now, current day, and going back to last year, the way a lot of Bears fans talk about him and get mad at other people when they talk down about him is just come on, you got to watch what's being put on film. It's very clear he's just not that guy yet. Going to the NFC South, the Buccaneers, sticking with the quarterback position, Jameis Winston. He's still being treated as the franchise guy. They're still holding out. I just think it's time to move on. It's still, Bruce Arians early on, we're not seeing enough yet to suggest that he's going to be the guy. He still has a lot of the same problems he's had since day one. He kind of just is who he is, but he's still, getting that benefit of the doubt and kind of having that franchise QB role. And I just think it's time to part ways with him. Most overrated player on the Bucs. For the Panthers, this was kind of a tough one because I feel like most people on the Panthers are fairly rated. So it was just really tough. But I went with the cornerback Bradbury, and that's only because, again, he's the only guy that I can really recall a lot of fans just for the past year or two, they hype him up a little bit too much. Not even Dante Jackson. It's always Bradbury. They'll say that he's one of the better cornerbacks in the league. He's a top 10 guy. I've heard this, I mean, maybe I'm just listening to the wrong people, but I've heard it. And he's certainly not that. He's a solid player, but he's just not nearly as good as I've definitely heard the praise that he's gotten. So he's my most overrated player on the Panthers. For the Saints, my team, at first I wanted to go with Anders Pete just for the simple fact that he made the Pro Bowl last year, and he is the worst player on the offensive line. He's the weak link, and he made the Pro Bowl. I know some people dropped out of the Pro Bowl, but it's just mind-boggling to me how he made the Pro Bowl. It was probably his worst season last year, but instead I'm going to go with Marcus Williams, and that's because, especially as of late, it just seems like he's regressing. He has not lived up to what he did his rookie year. Ever since the Minnesota Miracle, it seems like he hasn't quite been the same. His tackling hasn't gotten any better. If anything, it's gotten worse. Just the fundamentals of how he tackles is just still very bad. But more so lately, he's just not where he's supposed to be on defense. He's out of position a lot. And the person that's really taken a beating because of this is Marshawn Lattimore a lot. Because Marshawn Lattimore is being credited with giving up a lot of passes this year. But in quite a few of these situations, it was very clear that Lattimore was playing aggressive because he thought he had Marcus Williams over the top. If Marcus Williams would have been where he was supposed to be, Lattimore could have been aggressive. Maybe he lets the guy get over the top, but the play would have still been a success for the defense. But the problem is Marcus Williams isn't getting to where he's supposed to be a lot this year. We've actually seen the coaching staff put Von Bell in the on the side of the field where Marcus Williams used to be in certain situations because they actually trust him more to not mess up. Marcus Williams definitely has the better range. He can make those crazy sideline to sideline plays like we saw in the Monday night game when he made the interception, but there's also a lot of times where he's just out of position, and I think he's hurting the defense currently more than he's helping it. So I hope he turns it around, but I think just based on his play as of late and kind of going back to last year, he's probably the most overrated player on the team as of right now. And the Falcons, I got to go with Vic Beasley here, basically because A lot of people still think he's one of the best, I won't say one of the best, but a lot of Falcons fans still kind of hold him in high regard. He did have that big sack year a few years ago, but he's just not a very good player, just flat out. I mean, if you watch him play, it's very clear he's not that good of a player, but he's still, a lot of Falcons fans still kind of hold him in high regard for some reason. NFC West, the 49ers, Jerick McKinnon is my pick here, just because, the guy comes in every year, it's his breakout year, he's still the starter on the team, and he's just always injured, never sees the field. At this time, I think it's just kind of time to move on from Jerick McKinnon, maybe just bad luck on his part, but he can't stay on the field, but yet he's every year kind of given that benefit of the doubt of this is going to be the breakout year, and he's always, comes in with the starter role when it's probably just time to not see him that way anymore. For the Seahawks, I went with Shaquille Griffin. A lot of people think this guy is a really good player. He's just not. I mean, he's okay. He gives up a lot of touchdowns. He gives up a lot of big plays. A lot of people, for the past couple of years, thought he was going to be one of the next stars of, defensive backs. And he's just not that at all. Plain and simple. For the Rams, I wanted to go with Marcus Peters here. But I think, I feel like more people are coming around to the fact that Marcus Peters is who he is. He's going to be burnt toast a lot, but he's going to make some big plays for you here and there too, because that's how he plays. So I decided to go with Jared Goff. And the main reason is because, he's still held in high regard as one of the best QBs in the league. And it's not that he's a bad quarterback, but we all know who Jared Goff is. He's a guy that still can't really diagnose the defense. He'll just stare at the defense and just wait for Sean McVay to diagnose it for him. We've seen it happen, right? And we see a lot of games, even recently, where he's just making bad throws, bad decisions. And as high-powered as that team can be and how good that team is, it really feels like the more you watch them that it's, without Sean McVay, it would just unravel. That's what it's starting to feel like. Sure, the defense is obviously really good too. Wade Phillips, great coach as well. But Jared Goff, between some of the decisions he makes and the fact that he still can't really diagnose a defense on his own, you got to go with him being the most overrated player on the team. And for the Cardinals, I'm going to go with Michael Crabtree. Guy's just not very good anymore. Had some of his really good, best years with the Raiders. Had some good years with the Niners as well. He's an older guy now. Traveled around a little bit. He's just not that good of a player anymore. I'm not trying to be mean. He's just not. It's his time. I think. I just think that's just his time. He's not a Larry Fitzgerald. Larry Fitzgerald obviously still ain't the player he used to be either, because he's super old. But he's still a decent wide receiver. He's still decent. Crabtree's not even that anymore. It's just, it just is what it is. Now going over to the AFC, and we're going to start with the AFC East, and we're going to start with the Patriots. Why not? I think it's Julian Edelman. And again, this is another case of really good player, but that doesn't mean that you can't be overrated. I mean, we saw the whole long debate last offseason about should this guy be in the Hall of Fame? And that alone is just it right there. That's all I have to say. Julian Edelman's not a Hall of Fame receiver. If you just wanted to say postseason, yes, Hall of Fame postseason receiver. This guy does it in the postseason, but when you look at his career stats and you compare them to other names, and it's just he does not have the stats to be a Hall of Fame receiver. And you can't really look at rings. Rings don't carry the same kind of weight for a wide receiver as they do, obviously, for a quarterback. It's just different. And, Julian Edelman isn't the reason that he has as many rings as he has. Tom Brady and Bill Belichick are a lot more to do with that than it is Julian Edelman. But yes, he's a great receiver. I'd take him on my team. Great in the postseason, but there was even people, some of the analysts were calling him a top 5 receiver last year. He's not that good. He's a good receiver, but he's just not that good. So that's why he's the most overrated on the team. The Jets, Trumaine Johnson, very easy here. He got that contract, has not lived up to it. He was decent with the Rams, has not been good with the Jets. I don't know what happened with him this last week, but I remember on the Monday night game, he didn't even play. They just didn't play him, and he wasn't injured or anything. It was just coach's decision. They didn't play him. So that just kind of lets you know. And the Jets are bad. The Jets, defensively, the Jets aren't the worst in the world, but the Jets collectively right now just aren't very good. And the fact that he can't play on that team, or they felt that they had to just sit him, kind of tells you all you have to know about Trumaine Johnson. But when you look at his contract, he's being paid like a guy that should definitely be out on the field. Dolphins, we're going to stick with the cornerback position. I know Dolphins fans are going to hate this, but it's definitely Xavier Howard. And another case of good player, but just crazy overrated. And you're seeing me put a lot of cornerbacks on this list. And the reason, too, because of this is it seems like every fan base thinks they have a top 10, a top 5 cornerback. Every fan base thinks this, right? I'm a Saints fan, and many Saints fans think that about Lattimore. Like, he's a top 5 cornerback. He's not. Like, I'm realistic when I say that. He's not a top 5 cornerback, and Xavier Howard isn't either, and I've heard him talked about as a top 5 cornerback this whole offseason. He's a top 5 cornerback. I remember when the Madden ratings came out, and he wasn't rated in the top 10. They were losing their minds, and like, look, Xavier Howard is a good player. I don't care how many interceptions he got last year. Watch him play. He still gives up. He gives up a decent amount of touchdowns. He gives up a decent amount of plays, and he commits a decent amount of penalties. And this year, obviously the Dolphins are a complete dumpster fire right now, but I believe his Pro Football Focus grade as of right now for this year is like 45, which is just, that's just flat out terrible. But he's still a good player. I'm not going to say he's a bad player. He's not a bad player, but when you're talking top 5 of the position, top 7, he's not that. So he's the most overrated on the team. And for the Bills, this was a hard one too, because the Bills are another team where I feel like most of their players are fairly rated. So I had to go with Josh Allen, and that's just because, he's probably the one player, obviously, because he's the quarterback. He's the young quarterback. He is exciting to watch. He's talked about, people are already saying like, oh, he's the best quarterback from the draft class. Like, we don't know that yet. We haven't seen any of these guys develop enough yet. We still need to see way more from both, Josh Allen, Baker, Darnold. We got to see these guys play more. We got to see how things pan out. And people are already saying he's the best quarterback from the draft class. He's going to be, the Bills are 3-0, so obviously he's getting a lot of praise. Josh Allen still has a lot to work on. He still has a lot of faults in his game, but he is exciting to watch. So that's why he's the most overrated player on the Bills. Going to the AFC. Which division is this one? I get them confused. The AFC North. Start with the Bengals. It's Andy Dalton. Why is it Andy Dalton? Well, he's still kind of looked at as like the franchise QB, and a lot of people think he's like, he like still waiting for that like breakout, like, it's gonna all come together. It's not. I think Andy Dalton's time is about up. Still, there's definitely worse starting quarterbacks in the league for sure. I'm not saying Dalton like doesn't necessarily have a place in the league. I think he could still start, for a lot of teams, including the Bengals. He's probably the Bengals' best option right now, but I think the Bengals, in the short-term future, off-season, should be looking to get a quarterback. Browns, this was a tough one as well. There's probably a few guys you could go with here. I'm just going to go with David Njoku for the Browns because it just feels like every year, people are like, this is the breakout year for him to be, become a top 5 tight end, to become like a force at that position. And, whether it be injury or just, the Browns, just being worse than we thought they would be as always, it just doesn't seem like it's coming together. The luck's just not lining up for this guy. So that's why I'm going with David Njoku for the Browns. For the Steelers, I'm going to have to go with Bud Dupree because he's just not very good. He's just not very good, but there's a lot of Steelers fans that truly think he is. And I just don't see it. And that's all I can really say about that. He's just not very good. He came into the league with a lot of hype, has not lived up to it, not even close, but there's a lot of Steeler fans that still think he's a good player, and I just don't see it. And for the Ravens, this was another tough one, because the Ravens are another team where I feel like most of their players are fairly rated, but I went with Tony Jefferson, because I think if there was one person on the team that is a little bit overrated, it has to be him, because there definitely are a good amount of Ravens fans that think he's one of the better safeties in the league, and he's certainly not that. He's a solid player, for sure. He's not a bad player by any means, but he's also not one of the best safeties in the league, and I have heard him regarded too as that. So that's what I'm going with there. Next, we're going to go with the AFC South. We'll start with the Jaguars. Leonard Fournette. And I hate to say it because I'm an LSU fan. I love Leonard Fournette. But we just haven't seen him do it in the league, and I think part of it's just the situation. He's really never been on a team with a good quarterback. We'll see if Gardner Minshew can kind of turn that around. He's looked exciting early on, but Leonard Fournette, yards per carry in the league have been terrible. They've just been bad. And, again, he's seeing a lot of stacked boxes because there was never a lot of respect for the passing game there, so that definitely affects it. But, we see Saquon Barkley tear it up while there's not a lot of other threats. We've seen other running backs do it, and Leonard Fournette's kind of struggling to do that. So, but he's still regarded as one of the better running backs in the league, and he is not that right now. He could be that. I hope he turns into that, but he's not that right now. Going with the Titans, we're going to stick with running backs. Definitely Derrick Henry. Just not very good. He had a really good stretch last year at the end of the season, like an absolute amazing stretch. But he's not one of the better running backs in the league. If anything, he's probably one of the worst power backs in the league for the guy that's his size. Like, he's just not. He doesn't do a lot with it. And, man, Titans fans think this guy is the guy, and he's just not. He's not. He does have a tendency to have some plays here or there. He does. But throughout the course of a season, people were talking about, well, just look at his last 4 games last year. Well, look at his, look at the season and a half before that, though. Look at all those games, too. You can't just look at those 4 games where he was amazing and then just disregard the other 20 games that came before it where he was completely underwhelming. And you get more of those games than you get the amazing games, by far. So, Derrick Henry definitely the most overrated on the Titans. Going with the Texans, I guess this is just the running back division because I'm going to go with Lamar Miller for the Texans. Just a guy that's never lived up to the hype. And this is a guy that every year I'm waiting for him to break out. He just is what he is. This year obviously got hurt, which sucks for him. But I think it's probably about time to move on from him, especially now that he's going to be coming back from an injury. He's always just at best been a solid player, like an okay player, someone that, you could do worse, but you could do a lot better. And I just think, for what people still expect him to be, he's definitely the most overrated player on the team. And for the Colts, I'm going to go with Ebron, just coming off his best season, a lot of touchdowns, but people also don't realize, there's a lot of drops that come with that, and now that Andrew Luck isn't there, Jacoby Brissett doing his thing, but you're seeing kind of Ebron a little bit more back to reality. Still is going to always have an issue with drops. He's never going to be quite as good or live up to the hype that he was supposed to, I believe he was I want to say he was a top 10 pick to the Lions. I mean, was supposed to be like one of the next best tight ends the league's ever seen. Hasn't turned into that. Like I said, came off a big touchdown year last year, but definitely, people are looking at that and saying, oh, he's one of the best tight ends in the league. He's not. He's not even close. He's not a top 5 guy. He's just okay at best. And going to the AFC West. Let's start with the Chiefs, one of the best teams in the league. This was a tough one for me too, because I feel like most of their players are fairly rated. So we kind of go back to that cornerback position, and I'm going to go with Kendall Fuller because, again, solid player. There's a lot of Chiefs fans that think he's better than he is. He's just, he's a solid player, and there's nothing wrong with that. But he's not a top 10 guy. He's not a top 12 guy. It just is what it is. I think he's a solid player, but he's probably, if anybody, he's the only person I really could land on that team that I felt was overrated. The Broncos, definitely Joe Flacco. Didn't really think it was a good decision to bring him there. We've seen, so far early on, he's just not good anymore. He's had, he was okay with the Ravens early on. He had that really great postseason run where he won the Super Bowl, but he's just not a very good QB anymore. I just don't really see any benefits of the Broncos playing him unless they're trying to tank and get a good draft pick, which it looks like that's going to happen for them. So yeah, he's definitely the most overrated on the Broncos. The Chargers, Travis Benjamin. This was another tough one because I love the Chargers. I think most of their players are fairly rated. They have a lot of good players, but Travis Benjamin's really the only name I could come up with because a lot of people still think he's a decent receiver, and he's just not. He's just a bad receiver. He's just a flat-out bad receiver. And, people look at that team, and when they talk about the weapons, a lot of times people bring up Travis Benjamin for some reason, and he's not a good player. So I guess that's really the only reason I could land on him. And for the Raiders, the last team, I hate to say it, but the only name I could really think of was Derek Carr, and that's just because he's just been very underwhelming so far. He has, his stats don't always tell the full story, too. He makes a lot of bad decisions. He makes a lot of bad throws. And he's still, Raiders fans go really hard for him, and they regard him as a much better QB than he's been so far in the league, and that's just flat out true. The Raiders situation is not good right now. I hope that they, figure it out. They haven't looked as bad as I thought they would this year, especially after AB left. They've looked okay at times, but, they still are very, very deep in the rebuilding phase. So it's going to be hard for Derek Carr to shine, especially with his weapons being as limited as they are. Tyrell Williams is a nice player, but for being your number 1 receiver, you got a rookie running back, he needs more weapons. So it's not like he can do much with what he's got right now, but just from what we've seen so far in his entire career and the regard that he's held in, I definitely think he is the current most overrated player on the Raiders. So that's my list. Let me know below what you think. You can tell me how mad you are. You can tell me how dumb you think my list is. It's all good. Let me know below, and as always, I will see you guys next time.